Imagine a time when Germany wasn't one country, but dozens of small kingdoms and states divided by borders, rulers, and pride. Now imagine a single war, so powerful and so swift, that it brought them all together under one flag. What kind of conflict could do that? What kind of leader could make it happen? This is the story of the Franco-Prussian War, a war that didn't just shape a battlefield, but gave birth to a nation. Today, I'd like to share a story with you. It's a story from a time long ago, in the 19th century, about how a country called Germany came together through moments of great challenge and change. Back then, Germany wasn't one country yet. It was made up of many little states and kingdoms. They spoke the same language, but they weren't united. There was one place, Deutschland, that was strong and wanted to bring everyone together. There was a man named Bismarck. He was clever, and he believed that sometimes difficult choices had to be made to bring people closer. He helped start a war with France, not because he loved war, but because he thought it might help the German people feel like one. The war began in 1870. It was called the Franco-Prussian War. It didn't last very long, but it changed a lot of things. One of the most important moments was when the French emperor was captured in a place called Sedan. That changed how people felt suddenly. They realized that if they stood together, they were stronger. Then something very big happened, in a beautiful place called Versailles, inside a palace full of mirrors. The German leaders gathered. On January 18, 1871, they made a promise to each other. They said, "We are one people now." And they called their new country the German Empire. It wasn't an easy journey. And even though it came from war, what came after was a new beginning. Sometimes, even in hard times, people can find their way to each other. And history helps us remember how important it is to stay connected with our past and with each other. In the years leading up to the Franco-Prussian War, Europe was a continent filled with shifting alliances, growing nationalism, and deep political rivalries. One of the most significant tensions existed between France and the collection of German states. France, under Emperor Napoleon III, had long viewed the fragmented German territories as a natural buffer and a sphere of influence. However, the rise of Prussia as a dominant German power was beginning to challenge that balance. Prussia's military strength, efficient bureaucracy, and rapidly growing economy made it the natural leader among the German-speaking states. This growing dominance caused unease in France, which feared the emergence of a unified German nation on its eastern border. Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Prussia, saw opportunity in this rivalry. He believed that a war with France would rally the independent German states around Prussia. However, he needed to provoke France in a way that would make Prussia seem like the victim, thereby justifying the war and encouraging German unity. That opportunity came in the form of the EMS dispatch, a carefully edited telegram. The original message involved a diplomatic conversation between King Wilhelm I of Prussia and the French ambassador over a vacant Spanish throne. Bismarck altered the tone of the telegram to make it seem as if the French ambassador had insulted the Prussian king, and vice versa. When this edited version was published, it inflamed public opinion on both sides. France, feeling humiliated, declared war on Prussia in July 1870. What seemed like a diplomatic slight quickly escalated into a full-scale war. The German states, bound by cultural and linguistic ties and stirred by patriotic fervor, rallied behind Prussia. Thus, a long-standing rivalry rooted in political dominance and national pride became the spark for a conflict that would change the map of Europe. Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Prussia, was a master strategist who believed that German unification could only be achieved through carefully calculated steps involving diplomacy, manipulation, and, when necessary, war. He had already orchestrated wars against Denmark in 1864 and Austria in 1866 to isolate rival powers and bring the northern German states under Prussian control. However, the southern German states like Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden remained independent and were hesitant to join a unified Germany under Prussian leadership. Bismarck understood that only a unifying national cause could inspire these independent states to join willingly. He believed a common enemy, especially one as historically antagonistic as France, could achieve this purpose, to create the conditions for such a war. Bismarck capitalized on a diplomatic conflict involving the candidacy of a Hohenzollern prince for the Spanish throne. France opposed the idea, fearing encirclement by Hohenzollern monarchs in both Prussia and Spain. When the French ambassador approached King Wilhelm I of Prussia to demand assurances that no Hohenzollern would ever seek the Spanish throne, Wilhelm declined to make such a permanent commitment. The event itself was relatively minor, but Bismarck saw it as the perfect opportunity to provoke France. He edited the king's report of the meeting. The M's dispatch-making. It seemed as though both parties had insulted each other. When this edited version was released, French public opinion was enraged, and France declared war on Prussia in July 1870. This was precisely the scenario Bismarck had planned. The southern German states, feeling threatened by France and impressed by Prussia's leadership, joined the conflict alongside their northern counterparts. Through careful political engineering and manipulation of international events, Bismarck had succeeded in creating the unity he sought. The war became the catalyst for the long-awaited unification of Germany under Prussian dominance. The Battle of Sedan, fought on September 1, 1870, was one of the most decisive engagements of the Franco-Prussian War and marked a turning point in European history. The French army, led by Emperor Napoleon III himself, had attempted to relieve the siege of the fortress city of Metz, where another French army was trapped. However, the Prussian-led forces had already anticipated French movements and encircled the French army of Chalons near the town of Sedan in northeastern France. The Prussian, Bavarian, and Saxon troops outnumbered the French, and their artillery was better positioned and more effective. As the battle began, the French forces quickly found themselves in a disastrous position. The surrounding hills were held by German forces who bombarded the French from higher ground. French cavalry charges were repeatedly repulsed by well-coordinated infantry and artillery fire. Within hours, the French lines began to collapse under the relentless assault. The French command structure crumbled, and chaos spread throughout the ranks. Napoleon III, realizing the hopelessness of the situation and wishing to prevent unnecessary slaughter, made the extraordinary decision to surrender. The following day, on September 2, 1870, Napoleon III personally surrendered himself and his army of nearly 100,000 men to the Prussians. This surrender not only shocked France, but also stunned the rest of Europe. The French Empire, already struggling with internal divisions, collapsed almost overnight. In Paris, the news of the defeat led to the overthrow of Napoleon III and the proclamation of the Third Republic. For the Germans, the victory at Sedan was a moment of triumph and unity. It demonstrated the strength and coordination of the German military alliance, and further fueled the nationalist movement that Bismarck had carefully cultivated throughout the war. The path to unification now seemed inevitable. As the Franco-Prussian War unfolded, and victories mounted for the Prussian-led forces, a powerful sense of unity began to grow among the various German states. Prior to the war, Germany was a collection of independent kingdoms, duchies, and principalities, with its own rulers, laws, and loyalties. Although the northern states had already formed the North German Confederation under Prussian leadership after the Austro-Prussian War in 1866, the southern German states remained cautious and independent. The threat from France and the shared cultural identity among German-speaking peoples started to bridge that divide. The experience of fighting side by side in battle fostered a strong bond between soldiers from different German regions. Bavarians, Saxons, Württembergers, and Prussians were no longer just neighbors, they became comrades. The shared sacrifice and collective effort in the face of a powerful external enemy gave the people a reason to think of themselves not just as Bavarians or Saxons, but as Germans. This rising national feeling was reinforced by the press, public speeches, and popular songs that celebrated German bravery, honor, and destiny. The war also highlighted the effectiveness of Prussian leadership. Its well-organized military, efficient railways, and superior strategy impressed even the more independent-minded southern states. They came to see unification under Prussian guidance not as a loss of identity, but as a means of strengthening the German people as a whole. The idea that Germany should be one powerful nation rather than a patchwork of small, vulnerable states began to take hold not only among politicians but also among ordinary citizens. As the war neared its end, the calls for unity grew louder. The battlefield had become the crucible in which German national identity was forged, and the shared victory over France laid the emotional and political groundwork for a unified German Empire under Prussian dominance. On January 18, 1871, a momentous event took place in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, a place chosen deliberately for its symbolic value. In the heart of a defeated France, German leaders gathered to proclaim the formation of a unified German empire. After months of military success in the Franco-Prussian War, and with Paris under siege, the German states had agreed to join together under the leadership of Prussia. King Wilhelm I of Prussia was declared the German Emperor, or Kaiser, in a ceremony that marked the culmination of decades of political maneuvering and military conflict. The decision to hold the ceremony in Versailles was not accidental. Bismarck, the architect of German unification, wanted to deliver a message, not only to France, but to all of Europe. It was a declaration of German strength, unity, and pride. The hall, known for its opulence and association with French royal power, became the stage on which the birth of a new European power was announced. The presence of German princes, military leaders, and representatives from all the major German states signaled that this was more than a Prussian victory. It was a collective achievement. The new empire included both the North German Confederation and the Southern German states, with the notable exception of Austria. This lesser Germany model, dominated by Prussia, was exactly what Bismarck had envisioned. While Wilhelm I was hesitant about taking the imperial title, fearing it might overshadow his role as King of Prussia, Bismarck convinced him that it was essential for national unity. The proclamation turned Germany into a major political and military force in Europe. The empire's creation marked a dramatic shift in the balance of power and symbolized the emergence of a unified German identity built on shared victory and national ambition. The outcome of the Franco-Prussian War had long-lasting consequences for Europe and shaped the political atmosphere of the coming decades. One of the most immediate effects was the humiliation and resentment it caused in France. Losing the war, the capture of Napoleon III, and the fall of the Second French Empire created a deep national wound. The annexation of Alsace and Lorraine by the newly formed German Empire further intensified French bitterness. These provinces, with mixed French and German-speaking populations, were rich in resources and symbolically important. Their loss became a powerful grievance in French politics and society, fueling a desire for revenge that would later play a key role in the tensions leading up to World War I for Germany. The victory marked its dramatic rise as a unified nation and a dominant power in continental Europe. Under Prussian leadership, Germany now possessed the most disciplined army, a strong economy, and growing industrial capacity. The successful unification gave Germans a strong sense of national pride, but it also established a militaristic and authoritarian political structure. The empire was ruled by an emperor and largely influenced by the military and conservative elites, which limited democratic development. The war also altered the balance of power in Europe. With France weakened and Austria excluded from German affairs, Germany emerged as the central power on the continent. This new dynamic unsettled other powers such as Britain and Russia, leading to shifts in alliances and military planning. The diplomatic systems that followed, including Bismarck's alliances and treaties, were attempts to preserve peace. But they also contributed to a fragile system that could easily collapse under pressure. The Franco-Prussian War left behind both the triumph of unification and the seeds of future conflict. The emotional scars in France and the power consolidation in Germany would echo throughout Europe well into the 20th century. And so, the story of the Franco-Prussian War is not just a tale of battles and borders, it is a story of how a divided people found unity through conflict. How ambition and strategy shaped nations, and how the choices of a few leaders changed the fate of millions. From the sparks of old rivalries to the proclamation of a new empire in the heart of a defeated enemy's palace, the war forged a new Germany and redrew the map of Europe. But it also left behind wounds that would take generations to heal. History reminds us that every triumph carries a cost, and every unification begins with a struggle. In understanding this chapter, we learn not only about the birth of a nation, but about the human longing for identity, power, and belonging in a world forever shaped by the past